Yo, check this out, man. Today we have a banger, man. We have former Sergeant John Mattingly of the Louisville Metro Police Department. Look, his story involves the landmark case, the big newsworthy event of Breonna Taylor when they went to go serve a warrant. Anyhow, again, stand by, really good. We're gonna get a hold of John. He's gonna tell you the story from the perspective of internal affairs, because there was a criminal investigation, obviously, and now we're gonna talk about the admin portion. Stay tuned. Sauce.
When they do with all the cell phone footage and all that, you know, there's always that potential of the retribution of the people coming back at you. And one of the things I tell guys, number one, in your personal life, go ahead and before these incidents happen, put your stuff in a trust, clear your name from the internet. You know, I use officerprivacy.com. You can use these different things to prepare yourself in case one of these incidents happen, because they're becoming more prolific. And when they do with all the cell phone footage and all that, you know, there's always that potential of the retribution of the people coming back at you. As far as the case goes, the almost immediately the Commonwealth attorney, who is our district attorney, he distanced himself and was like, yeah, I've got a conflict here, so I can't, you know, I'll let the AG, the state AG, take it. So the state attorney general took the case, who happens to be a black guy, and he ran with it. And this took, I think, 7 or 8 months, which feels like forever.
My understanding, and we're going to get to what happened to you, but it's probably something that you didn't really experience with the investigating officer. Would that be pretty true and accurate?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I think the big problem with officers and IA compared to the chief's office is you want us to be transparent and accountable, but then we see their example of doing the total opposite. Man, I miss the camaraderie with the guys, because that's just where it was at.
Welcome again to another episode of Internal Affairs, a police podcast. Your host, Marlon Marachi, and I have learned to say that all of my guests are special. I just happen to have, you know what, John, thank you for coming, and I got to say, this is going to be a really good story, because we're going to talk about something that not many people are familiar with your story. Is that correct, John?
Yeah. A lot of places I go, people are like, man, I had no idea these things. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You know, it is an internal affairs podcast, and I do understand in this newsworthy, we can even say it's a landmark to the point where you actually wrote a book, and we'll talk about that a little later, about the Breonna Taylor case. You were involved, and my understanding is we really haven't pulled the curtains and talked about the disciplinary process. Is that correct? Good. So, look, this is what I do. Before we do a memory, I should say a trip down memory lane, I always ask my guests these two core questions. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, can you rate, or please rate, the importance of internal affairs, and I believe you guys call it professional standards unit, in a police department, and why?
I think it's level 10 because of keeping the accountability, because every single one of us in our lives, if we don't have somebody to answer to or some type of accountability, we'll stray a little bit. But I think the other side of that coin is you've got to have the number 10 investigators in there. You can't just throw the guys who are lazy, or the guys that you can't find another spot for them, so you put them in there, because that throws the whole cycle.
You know what? Very well said. There's been some guests, and of course, through my experience, where, you know, if you're the lieutenant or you're in charge of professional standards unit, also known as internal affairs, you would want someone that's got a good character, of integrity, along those lines. So my understanding, and we're going to get to what happened to you, but it's probably something that you didn't really experience with the investigating officer. Would that be pretty true and accurate?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Well, good. Well, listen, besides accountability, do you also feel that one of the reasons is because we want to be able to have that public trust and that transparency? Wouldn't that be something that you would agree with?
Yeah, that's great and all, and I agree with that 100%. But the problem is, in a lot of departments, that transparency is talked big game, and it's handled on the officer level. You know, we were pretty much under microscopes, and we were held accountable for things. But then when you got to the chief's office, that's when things kind of got muddy and cloudy, and you're sitting back. And I think the big problem with officers and IA compared to the chief's office is you want us to be transparent and accountable, but then we see their example of doing the total opposite. So that's kind of one of the things that I think rubs a lot of officers wrong.
Yeah, which is a reason why that stigma still exists, right? Where, hey, we're the dark side. I'm sure there's been so many nicknames you heard of, which is one of the reasons why, I created this particular show and this platform is to hope that one day we can kind of get away from the stigma and be transparent and have these, I suppose, these really tough conversations because people don't understand what you actually go through when someone gets an IA as the subject of an accused employee.
Yeah.
Uh,
Can you explain to me? I know you and I were having some phone conversations. I know there's a big difference between what level of misconduct or alleged misconduct is handled in your police department. Can you kind of explain that a little bit to us?
Yeah, so instead of IA, we have two units. One's called professional standards, and that does the administrative stuff, the policy violations, the complaints, that type thing. Then we have public integrity, which covers our crime complaints. Like if a city employee is accused of a felony, or they think they're up to something, they're the ones that investigate that. So they've kind of split it, instead of just IA, which in a lot of places covers both. We've got two separate units.
In your career, which we're about to get into, have you experienced both sides of the coin?
And I'll tell you what, professional standards, which is the policy, that's a lot easier to go in front of than when you go in the other one and they read you your rights and you gotta, it's a little different being on the other side of the table.
Okay. So, okay, well, fair enough. Let me ask you the second core question. You haven't worked internal affairs or professional standards unit. I beg to ask, what do you expect out of them? What do you think their job should be or is, in your opinion?
I think it's simply finding the truth. A lot of these complaints that we put out or that come against us, they've made it so easy. I remember when I first came on, people would call the divisions to where the initial complaint started, and 99% of the time, your sergeant on duty would take care of that complaint over the phone. It would be done after that, squashed. Now they made it so easy, and so there's no accountability for the people filing the complaints. So
Okay.
you can do anonymous online complaints, and they will investigate that the same as if they've got you on video doing something wrong. And I think that's kind of where we've let the tail wag the dog a little bit. So in
Right.
my opinion, I think a good IA guy is someone who just takes the information that's given to them and they do a thorough investigation and just put it out there what it is, because we do mess up sometimes. And in those times, we got to be held accountable. It's just the way it is.
Right. Absolutely. No, very well said. I couldn't agree with you more. I think at times we kind of forget about the reasons why we're trying to do this particular type of duties and responsibilities, and it becomes a little self-serving, or you just get lazy, like you said. And to my, and I'm sure you would agree, the motto, the phrase that I always use is "No stone goes unturned." And that is the honest truth. You know what? If you're going to be investigating, just make sure you turn every single stone. Every lead should be investigated and move on, man. So, well, thank you for all that. So, okay, let's take a trip down memory lane. Let me kind of, you can fill in the gaps for me. Let's see. You have 21 years. Is that correct? You did with the Louisville Metropolitan Police Department.
Yep, the whole time.
Okay, so let's see. You were a beat cop. I know you worked patrol. You were out in the streets. You've worked narcotics, violent crime unit. Detective sergeant, is that something that, that term is used a lot here in some agencies where you're a detective, but yet you're a sergeant. And last but not least, go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, last but not least, I got promoted in 2009. So some of that's kind of mixed in, beat officer for 5.5 years, then went to a division wide narcotics unit, was promoted in 2009 out of that, went back to late watch for a year. Then I went to the district detective's office is what it was. And we handled everything but business robberies and homicides. So we did shootings, we did all kinds of stuff. And I got my feel for that about 1.5 years of wearing a shirt and tie and doing all the reports and stuff. And I'm like, this ain't for me, man. I got to move on. So that's when I went to the violent crime unit.
Okay.
The hardest but best time of my career, violent crime gang. Stayed super busy. Then eventually in 2017 went back to narcotics, which is what I really enjoyed, the major case unit.
Okay, and you went back as a sergeant, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And the landmark incident that you were involved in, you were working narcotics, is that
Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yeah, I was still in narcotics at the time, and we were helping a unit that wasn't a narcotics unit. They were a place-based investigation unit, and they needed our assistance. So
Got it. Yeah. So look what happens, right? Hey, we need our help, and all hell broke loose. So let's talk about it. So let me just kind of set the groundwork or the foundation, if you will. Let's see. It was an officer-involved shooting, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that generated, obviously after the incident, there was some criminal allegations, and to the point where they were filed, and I'm sure you and your partners were facing that particular circumstances. Is that correct?
oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
not a fun place again to be in.
No, 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 no. And then my understanding is at some point it became administrative.
Correct. Yeah. So they try to generally they try to do the criminal stuff first and then the administrative. That way they're not dealing with Garrity and all the different things. So they can make you say certain things, that they want you to talk about later on. So yeah, it's kind of how it went.
Okay. Well, you know what? Just go ahead and kind of, and I know you've talked about this. I know you wrote a book about it, and let's kind of run down what happened. And I suppose what we're trying to focus in on is it's the IA process. I know you and I have had these conversations where I think one of my guests said it best. It's not the process. It's not the end result that's the penalty. It's the process that's the penalty. And I'm sure how you got treated, we can definitely have that conversation. So I'll leave the floor up to you, man.
Yeah. So I'll just give a real quick, 50,000-foot view of this because it could take 2 hours to talk about.
Of course.
So we were again tasked to help that night. We were kind of like day labor, let's go in, get this easy overtime, pad our pension a little bit, and get out of here. It was supposed to be an easy one. We had the apartment. We didn't have the trap houses. The reason for the original no-knock warrant getting signed was for the individual, but once they knew he wasn't going to be at the location we were hitting, we were asked to not do it as a no-knock and actually give it extra time because they were anticipating that Breonna Taylor would, cooperate and give more information on the little crime ring that was going on. And so when we went there that night, we did announce, took about a minute, which was a lot longer than we've ever stood at any other doors and banged and kept trying to get her to come out and went over and over and over this. And when she didn't, we breached the door because you can't stand there forever. And as soon as that door was breached and we started to enter, I was met with gunfire, hit me in my femoral artery, and I returned fire and then got off and figured, man, I'm out of this. I've got to go get a tourniquet on my leg. And as I'm going out, the guy that was behind me, as soon as I finished firing, and this is, you can talk about it and it sounds like this is some scenario that went on for a while. Everything is just bang, 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 and it's over. It happens so fast that people don't realize the speed that these things happen, and your brain still can kind of weirdly capture it all in slow motion. So as I'm getting out of harm's way, the guy that had stepped up kind of over me when I went down was still firing. And as soon as I cleared the breezeway, the other officer that was actually the third in line, he saw the gun flash. He knew I'd been shot. He didn't have access to the doorway, so he kind of button hooked around the front, and he knew about where the guy was shooting that he saw down the hall. So he was putting rounds through the window just to try to get him to quit shooting because he thought we were getting assassinated at the doorway. It sounded like automatic fire because of all the metal and the concrete and all the things that are happening. And so when I get out there, I'm like, give me a tourniquet. We get that on. But the main thing with all this is the fact that even though a police officer was shot first before we returned fire, you're down this very narrow hallway where two people were basically overlapping one another. When Kenneth Walker, the guy who shot me, when he shot, he dove out of the way, leaving Breonna in the hallway, and she attempted to follow him into the bedroom where he ran into. And that's when she was, unfortunately and tragically struck and lost her life.
Yeah, it's tragedy, and I just go on to say that nobody wins in this at all. There's nothing to be proud of. There's nothing to be sitting there going, great job and this and that, besides the fact that there was a life that was lost that you and your partners have to live with for the rest of your lives. And the community suffers, the department suffers. I mean, it's just any OIS is devastating all the way around. And I suppose the best way to try to look at this is, lessons learned and how can we improve. And I know we can sit here and talk for hours about the controversial knock-and notice, which I'm sure that's something that, for whatever reason, it became like very prominent. And so let me ask you this, John. Everybody arrives at scene, and I'm sure at some point, and I just kind of want to cover this, you and your partners were told, or kind of help me, not me, the audience, people who are watching and listening, understand how did this criminal filings and how did the district attorney's office or the state kind of walk me down, and when did it happen? How did you get notified that, hey, you know what, you guys are facing, criminal allegations?
Well, right out of the gate, March 13th, 2020 was when this took place. And that is the day that Trump kind of shut the nation down because of COVID. And so I honestly believe our mayor thought, because I was kind of hoping this, because Marlon, you know as well as I do, ever since Ferguson, people don't ask anymore when they hear about an officer involved shooting. They go, "Is everybody all right? Was it a good shoot?" What do they say? Were they black or white? That's all they're worried about. And so it shouldn't be that way, but that's the way it is. And when this happened, my first thought was like, man, I'm screwed. White dude, unarmed black female. I mean, this is worst case scenario, right? And so my hope, and I think the hope of the mayor was, this is such a big thing with COVID. The mayor, the president's on every day, the governor's on every day. People are scared to death. Toilet paper's gone, all this stuff, that maybe this will just kind of get pushed under the rug and we can move on and keep going and people forget about it. And they did for a while. But then when you had Ahmaud Arbery happen in April, Ben Crump got on that. And when he did, one of the attorneys from the Breonna Taylor case had worked for Ben Crump, and she called him and said, hey, can we get some national attention on this case? It's not getting any. And that was in mid-April. And then once that started, you could kind of feel the city change, the tension. And from the beginning, the department had already distanced themselves from us. I had a conversation with our chief the day after in the hospital room. And that was about a 2-hour conversation. I gave him all the details of the case, which you're not supposed to do, but I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. And it was kind of etched in my brain. So I was like, screw it. Here's what I'm going to, I told him everything I tell in the book, everything I tell when I speak is what I told him that day. And yet he still refused to put any of that out. But after that, I talked to one person from command staff from our chief's office after this event. That's it. In the past almost 4 years, I've talked to one person one time. And in the middle of that conversation, it got cut off. He said he would call me back. He never did. So from the beginning, you could feel the command staff distancing themselves just in case. And then after Ahmaud Arbery happened, then we had George Floyd, which again was a Ben Crump case. And so you had the trifecta of just bad things in 2020 come together. Right. And unfortunately, we were part of that.
Right. It's kind of like victim of consequence, if you will.
Yeah. Just, what it was, yeah. Sometimes you get good luck, sometimes bad luck. Yeah, but so right. As far as the case goes, the almost immediately the Commonwealth attorney, who is our district attorney, he distanced himself and was like, yeah, I've got a conflict here, so I can't, I'll let the AG, the state AG, take it. So the state attorney general took the case, who happens to be a black guy, and he ran with it. And this took, I think, 7 or 8 months, which feels like forever when you're waiting to hear the demise, whether the axe is going to come chopping down on your head or not. So right. That was a super long time. And during that process, you just don't know which way to go. Unfortunately, I wasn't indicted in that, but the guy who had button hooked around and shot through the glass was. He went to trial, was acquitted. The feds turned around, charged him with the same crime, plus added civil rights violations to it. We just got done with that trial. It was a hung jury. They've announced they're going to retry him. So this poor guy's life, I had 8 months of not knowing what's happening. This guy's had almost 4 years and another year down the road before this trial starts. So, man, you talk about the process being the punishment. Yeah, this guy, I can't imagine, the ulcers he's growing in his stomach that day after day after day, going through 2 different trials, going to hit a third one, just not knowing his fate. So the process does suck. And in our IA, or our professional standards unit, it already had a bad rep of taking a year and a half for simple complaints to get cleared. And during that meantime, there's times you can't get transferred to other units because you got a case open. You can't leave this department and go to another one because state law says you can't. And so there's all these, the power of IA, the power of our professional standards is way beyond just investigating a complaint and presenting that to the chief. It turned into almost a Gestapo type thing where they have complete control over you.
Wow. Okay. So, I love establishing timelines here. So here you are at the hospital, and like you said, you gave a voluntary statement, right? And after how long did it take to recover? And I know you said it was 8 months, but where were you? You were recovering, and at some point, did you go back to work, or how did that go down?
Yeah. So I was only in the hospital like 3.5 days. And
Okay.
I was like determined to get out. I'm like, man, I'm out of here. I'm going to walk. They said, as soon as you can walk on this walker, you can get out. So I jumped up and did it. It was like, I'm done, just grit my teeth and go. So it took me about probably 2.5 months to pretty much recover. Now my leg's still numb from the nerve damage and stuff, but about 2.5 months before I was signed off on by the doctor to go back to work. But again, part of this process is you're on paid administrative leave. So now you no longer have your overtime. You can't go work extra jobs because everything has to get approved through the department. So now you're on your base pay for a year waiting to come back. And then the day I came back, which was, it was in the end of April of 21. So a little over a year, 14 months, 14 months. I came back, and the day I walked in, now granted, I hadn't violated any policy that had been cleared. I hadn't violated any law that had been taken care of. I walk in, and my major, who was a new major to me, says, "Hey, I need to talk to you in my office." This is first 30 minutes I'm back. I walk in, he hands me a paper, and it's an involuntary transfer to the property room. Now I'm over our HIDA task force. I've got all this federal built-in overtime and all these people I'm over and all these different things. And suddenly I'm being punished for getting shot in a warrant by getting put in the basement in the property room. And I looked at him and I said, "What is this for?" And the tagline is "for the good of the department." That is their end around to get around our contract, because they can't just move you. But if they say it's for the good of the department, they can do whatever they want. And
Wow.
So I knew the writing was on the wall then. Our chief, who we had gotten since our one chief got fired, that was the chief that I talked to. We had a new chief come in from Atlanta, and her first public statement said, basically, we were white supremacists and that it should never happen. We would never do this to a white person and white into town. This is her first press conference on TV. And I'm sitting back going, man, you're my boss calling me a white supremacist. But then when I go into work and see I was transferred, I thought, okay, the writing's on the wall. It's time for me to leave. I had enough years, and I just bounced.
Okay. So you pretty much retired with 20 plus.
Didn't want to, but when you're kind of put in a corner, knowing that they're looking to get you for whatever reason, it's time to go.
Did you have an internal affairs process along with when you came back, or at any point during all this?
Yeah, before I came back, it was right after, I believe it was right after the attorney general announced that he wasn't going to press any charges on me. I had a meeting with our professional standards, gave a statement then, recorded statement, video statement, all that stuff. And the guy who did it was kind of known as the henchman for our professional standards. He was the go-to guy when they wanted somebody fired, when they wanted somebody to have an allegation that stuck. And so, but I'd worked with this guy on Late Watch when he came on. He came on after me, and everybody always knew him as kind of like he was kind of a hippie that was a cop. It's really weird. It's almost like the two didn't go together. But he seemed like a nice enough guy back then. But this was, 15 years ago. And so when he's going through and talking to me about this case, I'm giving the exact answers, because the truth never changes. So I don't have to sit here and think, okay, what am I going to say now? This is what happened. And when you have somebody give a testimony or a statement over and over and over, and it doesn't change, that should be a cue, because as a cop, people forget their stories and they just mess up.
Yes.
And it's the little details. And so when I went through this, he was just being condescending and accusatory. And so at the end, he was like, "Do you have anything to say?" And, I let him know how I felt, because I was like, dude, put yourself in my shoes, what we've been through, and here it is laid out, and you're still being just a jerk. So this is kind of how he was.
Do you recall what the allegations were, if you can remember?
Yeah, it was we didn't de-escalate, which I don't know how you de-escalate from you turn the corner and get shot. I mean, you shoot back, that is de-escalate the situation.
Right. So you serve a warrant, the door opens, shots are being blasted at you guys, but yet you're supposed to de-escalate. Got it. All right. So that's one allegation.
But the one that he recommended me being fired on was he said I didn't have a isolated target, but they were overlapping, and the guy is in front of her shooting at me, and so it was a lose-lose situation is what it was.
Okay, so you felt as though some of these allegations were pretty serious enough to consider termination?
No, he recommended termination. He sent that up. He forwarded the packet up recommending termination. Fortunately, our chief at the time, who was an interim chief, stepped in and said, no, this, I've looked at the case file, I've looked at all the stuff. It doesn't meet those requirements.
Got it. Okay, so he recommended, well, let me ask you this. This is kind of weird in terms of the process. Is he the investigating officer?
Is he?
Yeah. He was the one that was investigating this whole admin process for you. Is that correct?
Yeah, he was the main guy.
And somehow, some way, which is a big no-no, he decides to give a recommendation of removal.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, go ahead.
Previously, before this event, the entire time LMPD's been in existence, if a case goes to RIA or professional standards and it gets resolved where there's no punishment, that stayed in the case file and it wasn't revealed. Well, suddenly in the middle of this case, the new female chief who came in and said we were racist went through and said, nope, I want everything on this case totally released to the press. And so when they got a hold of this, that was the headline. Wow. One of their own even thinks that they should, that they were wrong in this and should be fired. So it pitted the public against us just a little bit more than was already there. It was all so unnecessary. So many things that were just unnecessary due to lack of what we talked about earlier. We have to be transparent, and the department just sat on their hands because the original accusations were we had the wrong apartment. She was asleep in bed. We didn't knock and announce. The boyfriend, who was the main target, had been in custody for 10 hours. None of that stuff's true. And it was so easily refutable. All the chief had to do was hold up a copy of the warrant and go, no, her name's on it, her car's on it, her social's on it, her bank account's on it, everything's on this warrant. But for some reason, they have, even to this day, have never refuted any of those claims that the Ben Crumps of the world were putting out there.
Wow. That's the big no-no rule. And of course, as far as I'm concerned, one of the lessons learned I got out of this is that, look, when you're the investigator, no one's asking you to be the adjudicator. That is just something that is just a really bad practice. Don't do that. No one asked you, Mr. Investigating Officer, what you recommend or what you think. Just present the facts, give it to the next level review, and at some point the chief's going to have to make a determination, and he or she is the adjudicator. So that rather surprising that it seems as though, again, it was probably self-serving, probably a little biased towards you and your partners. And you know what? That doesn't sound right. And how long ago did this? How long did you have to wait before you found out the adjudication of this internal affairs complaint?
I think it was like November or December of 2020.
Okay.
So it was about 9 months.
Okay, so for 9 months you were left in the dark.
And I had no idea he had recommended firing until about 3 months after that. That's when they changed the decision to release it. I don't know why she changed it 3 months later to release it, other than to make us look kind of bad. That's the only thing I can think. But then once that was put out, I saw that online. I was like, whoa, you want to be fired? I had no idea. So it was weird.
Wow. And those are the only two allegations you can remember? I know de-escalation. I know there was an isolated, which that kind of makes no sense. It doesn't make any sense in the word of how do you weigh that? How do you, in terms of preponderance, and I'm sure the standard of proof is preponderance, right? More likely than not, but you're in the middle of this tactical situation, and I just don't understand how you can pass judgment and say, well, you know what, you could have done this, you could have done that, which by the way, you know this, it happens all the time in all OISs. I've been to plenty of review boards where they'll say, which is fine. Hey, at some point you got to pass judgment. And I get that. But it's just quite difficult to really put yourself in their shoes and say, well, I could have done this. And wouldn't you agree that's at times, especially after this incident, it's not so much of what you actually did or what tactics you deployed, but it's the things that you didn't do. Would that be safe to say?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because they can always, we can what if stuff to death.
Correct.
And that's the problem with coming to a conclusion before you do your investigation. I think that's kind of what he did. And he made the investigation fit his conclusion as opposed to facts.
Right.
Yeah.
So you felt as though he was just biased from the get-go. I mean, they had an agenda.
I think because everybody else in this case, the two guys that shot with me were both already fired. So
you're the only one left.
I was the ribbon on top. Yeah. Got
it. Well, hey man, thanks for sharing that. Is there anything, well, you know what? I'll go ahead and ask you, what lessons learned? What's the takeaway from this internal affairs process? Because again, it's something that I'm sure you haven't discussed. I know you discussed this case in many, many, many stages and platforms, but we would like to know, just from a disciplinary perspective, from the eyes or the lens of this internal affairs process, what can what takeaways do we have, or what lessons learned?
Well, I think from a leadership standpoint, I think they need to put people, the best internal affairs guys I've seen are the guys who were like the real police. And you know what I mean by that. They were the guys who had been out there, who had been investigated prior because they went out and were proactive or got their hands dirty and actually did work. And again, the problem with what I'm seeing, or what I saw a lot in my career, was we kind of had a mix. You had some guys that were workers that got put in that position, but then you had plenty of guys who were scared to death to do police work, that were just paper pushers that ended up in positions like that because that's where they wanted to be. So it's hard for a guy like that to really sit back and judge a guy who's an aggressive police officer. But what I take from it is that you can't put much credence into it after I've seen the slanted views of unfortunately what took place in our case. And hopefully that's not the standard nationwide. We get accused of, quote, taking care of our own in the thin blue line, which all that stuff's crap. That may have taken place in the 60s and 70s. That stuff's out the window now. Everybody's out for themselves. And so for people to think that our unions are strong enough to run cities, which is bull. Our union is weak sauce. And then the fact that guys are, quote, covering each other's crimes and stuff up. There might be guys here and there that are buddies that do that, but that's not a whole on policing. So that was kind of just my takeaway, just that it's just kind of a dog and pony show, honestly.
Yeah, so everybody's out for themselves, and unfortunately, levels of review are self-serving.
Right.
Okay, well, hey, thank you for sharing that. Let's move on to the next segment, and I'm going to ask you, I normally do best and worst of your career, but I'm going to go with worst first, and then I'll ask you best because I want to leave on a really good note. So I'm going to ask you, I suppose absent this incident, talk to me about something that was just very impactful on a negative way or worse in your career that you saw or you experienced that you can share with us.
You're talking about just an incident like that I was involved in? Yeah,
an incident. Yeah, it's something that just, because a lot of what happens is I ask my guests and they always go back to a time when they had a radio call or something that's just, gruesome and just sad and tragic.
Yeah, so ton of tragic stuff, but there's a few that really stick out, and this one kind of happened this time of year. It was like 2 weeks before Christmas. I was in plainclothes and narcotics. Me and my partner were going down a street. We hear the beat guys call out that they're behind a stolen car and they were chasing it, and it was kind of like two streets parallel to us. So we flipped around because we have a bunch of one-way streets in Louisville in our downtown, and so we kind of flipped around and we're paralleling the car. Then he gets on the radio and goes, "Rail, be advised, they just struck a tree." So we go ahead and we cut straight over, and we're there as stuff's just, coming to a stop. And there were 5 kids in this car. The driver had stolen the car, gone to this church's event that was letting out in the community, and it's in a rough part of the community. But these 4 other kids had gone to this church event They came out. This kid pulled up. They really didn't know him. They knew him from school a little bit, but apparently they didn't hang out with him. They didn't know his history. He said, "Hey, you want to ride?" They all jumped in, all 4 of them. So they're going down, 5 of them in this vehicle. When they hit this tree, and this tree is not, but man, I'm not kidding, 10, 12 inches in diameter. It ripped this little Honda Accord in half. It slid sideways and just ripped this car in half. And when we get there, there's a kid on the sidewalk. There's one stuck in the back seat where the car smashed, another one in the passenger seat. So we're doing CPR on these kids. We're doing all these things. And the driver of the car, naturally, the turd, has a broken nose. That's all he's got. And he's over there laughing about it. These other 4 kids died, all 4 of them.
Wow.
So we go to the hospital, and I'm back in the emergency room where he's at. It's not my case, but I was on scene, so they're going to question you. You're going to do all that stuff. I go back there, and he's still just laughing about it. And so I had to leave because I'm like, man, I want to hurt this kid.
Right,
He's killed 4 kids, 15 and under. And when I go out into the waiting room, naturally it's chaos because all these family members and stuff. I go into the room where the actual family is. When there's a tragic event, they have these smaller rooms in the ER that they put them in so the preacher or whoever on scene at the hospital can come talk to them. And I knew the 4 kids had died, but I didn't know the dynamics of who they were and how it all worked. I go in this room, and this dad stands up, and he goes, "Please tell me, my boys are dead. Are they alive? Are they dead or alive?" And he grabs my vest, and he's shaking me, and he's crying. And come to find out, all three of the 4 boys were his, all his kids. And they died 2 weeks before Christmas. He's talking about how, man, I just bought them all their Christmas gifts. And to have in the inner city a dad that's involved in their kid's life is rare to begin with, and we know this. But the fact that now that's taken away from him, and then the other guy, the other dad, I met him that night, and so it was just, that's one of the things that stuck out in my head, because just this past year, and the guy that did it, the kid, and he's an adult now, he did like less than a year for that because he was a juvenile, and so he's been in and out of prison ever since. About a year ago, he shot a cop, and he got shot back. He's still alive. But just those things kind of trigger you more because you're like, why is this guy even out? Why is he out to keep committing crimes? He's robbed people since then. He's stolen a ton of cars, ran from cops, and they just don't keep him in prison or in jail. And so that one kind of stuck with me because even a couple of years later, I'm working an event, and I'm talking to this guy who's the parking attendant. And I didn't put 2 and 2 together. And we're talking, and he mentioned something. Yeah, I lost my son a couple of years ago back. And I said, man, what happened? And he tells me a story. That was the 4th kid that had died. So now I'm talking to this dad. And this event I worked every year. It was our state fair. And so I would see him for like the next 4 years, and we kind of became friendly. But yeah, that's probably the biggest tragedy that sticks out in my head.
Well, thanks for sharing with us, John. Really appreciate that. Okay, let's get to the good stuff. Let's leave on a really good note. Talk to me about something that's funny, or just something, the best that happened in your career that you can share with us.
Well, I don't know if it's probably not the best, but it's the one just
or rewarding, or just that you're blessed with, and
whatever.
Yeah, well, I'll just tell you this real quick, because in order to keep your sanity, you got to play like practical jokes on each other and stuff.
That's right. Sense of humor is the best thing for this profession.
Yeah. So when we were in the violent crime unit, I'm not kidding. That's the hardest I've ever worked in my career. We get there at 10 in the morning. We'd stay till 2 in the morning, and it was just go, go, go. Some days you'd swing in Taco Bell 11 o'clock at night and grab something and just keep rolling because it was just that busy. And so we were in this older building, which is where our offices were. So it was the concrete blocks, and one of the bathrooms was on the edge. So it was surrounded in concrete block. It's a little bitty bathroom, just a little, one banger. And there was a gap under the door. So one of the guys was in there one day, pants around his ankles, going bathroom. Oh man, we found some bottle rockets. So naturally they go up underneath the door, and they're bouncing around while he's in there, jumping up and down, trying to protect himself. So just stuff like that, man. That's that's what I miss about the job. It's not, it was fun going through doors. It's fun, the police chases and all that. But man, I miss the camaraderie with the guys because that's just where it was at.
Don't you wish someone had the phone that could just kind of record in the bathroom, just record the whole thing?
I wish you had. That'd been great. But we didn't want to let him know it was coming. It was too late. Those things are bouncing off the walls coming at you. He didn't have a choice.
And he was just probably like screaming or just freaking out, I would imagine.
Yeah, and he was usually the funny guy. He was the one that kept us in stitches all the time.
Got
Now
it.
we got
Got
to give him back a little.
Payback. That's right. That's what they say about payback. I won't repeat the rest. Payback is, you know what. Hey, thank you for sharing all that. And look, we're getting ready to conclude. Anything you would like to tell anyone who's listening and watching that's thinking about this profession, who is a young officer right now, getting into this profession as they go through their journey, maybe someone who's promoting the sergeant, or someone who just got involved in a major incident in an OIS and an officer-involved shooting. I'll leave the floor to you, and anything you can advice you can give.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I tell guys, number one, in your personal life, go ahead and before these incidents happen, put your stuff in a trust, clear your name from the internet. I use officerprivacy.com. You can use these different things to prepare yourself in case one of these incidents happen, because they're becoming more prolific. And when they do, with all the cell phone footage and all that, there's always that potential of the retribution of the people coming back at you. So those are a couple little things that you can do ahead of time. But the main thing is, man, nowadays you've got to kind of counterbalance what's worth it. It used to be you could run and gun on this job, you could have a good time, the public respected you. Now things have just kind of flipped a script, and I just be careful. Is what you're getting ready to do police wise, is that worth your future? Is that worth the potential of being the one that's put out there, hung out to dry? Because unfortunately, a lot of departments will do that. If it comes down to you or them, you're just a number and you'll be gone. So, I don't mean that in a discouraging way, because I still think there's a lot of proactive, good stuff you can do, but just be smart about it. Things aren't like they used to be. You can't, heck, we can't even take care of tickets for people we know anymore, in the court. So you're definitely not going to be able to get away with anything on the street. And I don't mean anything illegal, because we're not pushing that. I'm just saying the hard enforcement, the hard nose, go after the bad guy deal. It's just different now. So just be careful. But we do need good officers. People say all the time, would you discourage your sons from being police? And I said, if that's what their calling is, then no, I'll push it, because we need good guys, because that's who's going to be protecting us and our grandkids and keeping society kind of flowing smoothly. So, as bad as I think the profession is right now, I hope we continue to get some good ones down the line.
Very well said, my friend. Hey, John, man, thanks for all your time. I really appreciate you coming on the show. It's messages and lessons learned and takeaways that I'm certain that everybody's going to listen and, tell themselves, hey, listening to this and watching this is very, very important. On that note, my friend, I hope to see you in LA in April. So let's get together. We'll have a beer and go ahead. Yes, I almost forgot.
Real easy to remember. And if you want to see the details of this story, if you want to get to get your hands dirty looking at it, real easy read. I wrote it. I'm a dumb cop, so easy for you to understand. 12 Seconds in the Dark. Go to Amazon and get it. It's pretty cheap right now. It's on sale.
Absolutely. And I'll put it on the episode as well and all that good stuff. John, thank you so much for coming on. Don't forget to go Code 6. Happy New Year. A warm welcome to our sponsors, the Titan Group, Professional Investigation, are pioneers in the world of professional investigations. With a legacy defined by precision and integrity, the Titan Group stands as a beacon of excellence in the field, led by a team of seasoned professionals. Their expertise spans a spectrum of investigative services, from internal affairs investigations to complex workplace matters. Today, we are a privileged partner with the men and women of the Titan Group, who serve many clients throughout the state of California and other selected states. Look, cops are under scrutiny like never before, but a lot of training they receive is little more than check the box and death by PowerPoint. That's not good enough. The Savage Training Group is different. Our expert instructors provide modern training that helps cops perform when it matters the most. Check out savagetraininggroup.com to learn how we are raising the bar of law enforcement training. Their website's links are on the channel. And last but not least, don't forget to subscribe. Hit the like button and share. See you on the next episode.